this is Charlie and welcome back. Now in this lesson we're going to talk about negative self-talk, negative beliefs, limiting beliefs, whatever you want to call them. But what I'm specifically talking about here is the negative things that you say about yourself to yourself. You know, the stuff that you say in your head. You know, whether it's like, oh, I'm not that good, or I'm not that smart, or I could never do that. What you're actually doing is expressing your beliefs. Now remember, in an earlier lesson we spoke about how beliefs are really nothing more than a judgment that you've made at some point in your life about how the world works for you. So if you're someone that said, well, I could never jump out of a plane, you're sharing a belief. Now the reality is you could actually jump out of a plane. What you're saying is, I don't think I would have the bravery to do that. And anytime someone says a limiting belief, what we want to try and do to help that person is to get them to go back and check their map, check their model of the world, to see if that statement that they're probably used to saying for a long time is still valid. And one of the ways to learn how to be aware of your own self-talk is to position yourself in such a way that you can help other people. So if you ever hear somebody say something like, oh, I could never jump out of a plane, there's about 6 statements that are your arsenal to tackle that. And it'd be worth writing these down if I haven't put it in a handout already. And the first response is to say, oh, right, in the past. So I could never jump out of a plane. Oh, right, in the past you haven't been able to. Because what that statement does, it gets them to go and check where they made the judgment. And they might have made the judgment when they were 12 years old after watching a movie about a skydiver that had an accident. So what we want to do, you could say, instead of in the past, you could go, oh, right, previously. Because you're asking the person to go back and go, yeah, previously I haven't been able to jump out of a plane, and they might say, and I never will. But what you're trying to do with these responses is to get the person to go and check where they made the judgment and if it's still valid today. Because what we're trying to do when we help people is to try and help them to see that there are other options available. Now, the more rules that you've put in place, the less options you've got. And if you're holding a belief that you're an angry guy and you don't believe that you could learn how to have composure, you're putting a limit on yourself there with your own limiting belief. And I would question that and I'd say, right, in the past you haven't been able to keep your composure. Because what I'm doing is trying to put it in plain view that the past doesn't equal the future. And realize this, everybody's always changing. Nothing stays the same. And you can have some remarkable turnarounds of all sorts of things. But in this world that anything's possible, if you haven't been able to jump out of a plane for the first 40 years of your life, well, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the situation for the next 40. If you're someone that's continually got into nasty arguments and showed anger, doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be for the next 40 years. So whenever you see somebody that says a limiting comment like, I could never ask her out, another reply is, what would happen if you did? Because you're then catapulting them into the future and getting them to picture that they could do something. I could never ask that girl out. Right, until now, there's another response. Because what you're saying to the person is, just because that was your old rule doesn't mean this is your new rule. So when you can help people by saying, here are the phases. Oh, in the past. Oh, previously. Yeah. Oh, until now. Consciously. I like that one. And the other one is, well, what would happen if you did? So with those 6 statements, what you then have the ability to do is pose back a question to the person who's said their limiting belief and get them to examine their model of the world or where they made that judgment. Okay? Now, when you can go out and help a number of people and just pick them up on the past doesn't mean the future, you start becoming aware of the things that you say to yourself. Now, when you say something like, I'm not that smart, I just can't emphasize how damaging it is. It doesn't sound, you just say it, I'm not that smart. But it sets a whole series of things going off in your brain when you say such a comment. So, if you say I'm not that smart, what happens is you start to believe that you're not that smart. And I've seen this many times with tradies, for example, that have left school early in year 10 or something like that. And of course, because they have that void, they weren't there at school when others were, they have a belief that they've missed out on something. Now, if they might have started a trade, and don't get me wrong, some of the smartest people I've ever met have been tradies. But there's a lot out there that, because they left school early, have taken with them the belief that they're not that smart, mainly because they missed something, or they were judging it on their school marks. And there could be any number of reasons why someone got poor marks in school. Now, I think I might have even mentioned earlier in the program about a time when I met this tradie, and I asked him a question and he said, well, I don't know, mate, I'm a bit of a dumbass. I left school in year 10. And I went, oh my God, you got to stop saying that, dude. Oh, why? I did. I left school in year 10. And this guy was 40. So for 20 years, he's been telling himself, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, or I'm not that smart. Now, when this guy is given a mentally challenging task to do, because he doesn't believe he's that smart, he'll pass that on to somebody else to do. And he won't get the mental exercise that completing that task would have provided. Now, if you do that over 20 years, and you keep avoiding mentally challenging tasks, you'll have actually eventually become a bit of a dumbass. Now, the other thing that's going on, if you're telling yourself that, remember I said earlier that whatever belief you've got, your brain is constantly zoning, looking for evidence that might support any one of those beliefs you've got. And so that tradie, when he forgot someone's name just after meeting them, something that I do, forget where he left his keys, forget why he walked into a room, forget something that he used to know. The person with the limiting belief about how smart they are, that all goes under that banner. Oh, this is why, because I'm not that smart. And the belief then starts to become an excuse. So you've got to be careful about, the good phrase is, don't believe everything you believe. Because a belief is just a judgment that you've made at some point in time. And if you're going to talk yourself down and say negative things about yourself, you need to realise that that's the program that your brain's going to run. Now, one of the best quotes I've ever heard is, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. And that's so true. Because if you think you can, you believe you can do something, like stay composed, well then you'll search for methods and ways to go about achieving that. And I've provided them all in the program anyway. Made it nice and easy. But if you don't believe you can become composed, probably not going to watch most of the content because you just don't want to try. Because it's not something you believe. So I liken this to cleaning up weeds in the garden. And if you've got weeds in the garden, they just need to come out. You need to get on top of them. And the reason is, the weeds eventually take the garden. Same thing goes with negative self-talk. You can talk yourself down, and down, and down, and talk yourself down to a deep, dark hole of poor self-worth and poor self-respect if you don't keep this in check. So if you're in the habit of it, stop it now. Ask someone to monitor and listen for it if you say such statements. But by you being able to help other people, you'll then hear it when you say these sort of statements. So, finding your limiting beliefs that you've got, it's like opening up your jacket and finding a whole lot of weeds growing there, and pulling it out and going, you rotten bugger, and getting rid of it. Okay? So again, more belief work into this equation. But negative self-talk, clean it up just like you would weeds in a garden. That's it for now. If you've got any questions, shoot me a message and I'll answer them on another video. Take care, look after yourself.